Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to today's webinar, Change Management in the Age of COVID-19, Human Resources' New Role. I'm Brian O'Leary, Executive Director of the Book Industry Study Group, and welcome to, this is the second of 7 sessions that we're going to be doing. That is our virtual annual meeting of members. We have 5 yet to go. These include Thursday evening this week, lessons drawn from publishing entrepreneurs. Next week, 2 sessions on real-time reporting and bigger data, and the week following, sustainable publishing, where we need to go. We'll also be doing our BISG annual industry awards celebration on September 11th at 1 p.m. and then a keynote conversation with Barnes & Noble CEO James Daunt on September 11th. These events are all being brought to not just the membership, but the book publishing community at large, without charge, courtesy of Bowker, which sponsored this series for us. We're very appreciative. Bowker's been a significant supporter for the Book Industry Study Group for several years, and we really appreciate their stepping in to make it possible for us to do that for you this year. Today, we're fortunate to have 3 people who are really good at the very topic of human resources and how things have changed in the last 3 to 6 months. These include the participants today include Kate Danzer from Princeton University Press, Randy Petway, who you might know from prior work in book publishing, but currently with LinkedIn, and Andrea Weinzheimer at Hachette Book Group. Today's session is being led by Andrea, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brian. I just wanted to unmute. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd love to be able to see the audience, but we're going to pretend we know what they look like. So this is great. So I'm Andrea Weinzheimer. I'm the Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Hachette Book Group, generalist by training, so I do a lot of things. And this has been a really, really interesting time. My background is only in HR, and it's been in the investment field, book publishing, and consulting. But I'd like to hear more about our panelists. So Kate, why don't you start and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Andrea. Hi, I'm Kate Danzer. I am the HR Director at Princeton University Press. I'm relatively new to the publishing industry. When I joined the press 3 years ago, that's when I entered the industry. Previously, I worked for a social policy research firm. So I've always kind of been in this academic research space though. But my professional background is it sounds very similar to Andrea's, all HR, very much a generalist, have covered quite the gamut of all things HR. Yeah, I think that's enough about me. Randy?
Hello, how are you? I'm Randy Petway. This is a homecoming of sorts for me. I've spent probably nearly 20 years working in the publishing space on the technology side, but working with organizations that folks like you belong to. More recently, I've moved on and started working for LinkedIn, where I work again now on the HR side, and that still in technology, but providing technical and data solutions to HR professionals in the talent acquisition, employee engagement, learning and development space. So you know, kind of a mixed background of HR, technology, and publishing.
It's really interesting. Thank you, guys. So if ever there was a time to talk about change management, I think this is it. It's no longer an academic exercise. We were thrown into it a few months ago, and it seems that it continues to just keep changing, and we keep adapting. So really curious about a couple of questions relative to change management, with the idea, or if you could weave in, what kind of population do you have? Are they office population? Do you have warehouse workers? How does that factor in? Are there language barriers and other sort of diversity issues that you've had to consider during these different areas of change during this COVID crisis? Is your staff mostly remote anyway, so this was not a huge issue for a good number of people. So with that in mind, as you're answering the questions, that'd be really, really helpful. So the first question is, like, how did you determine your communication strategies and how best to communicate with your employees during this time? There's lots of different ways we can do it. There's, you know, video, there's phone, there's email, there's posting. So I'm just curious, Kate and then Randy, if you want to share what you've been doing.
Sure, all of the above, Andrea. So I think, strategic communication is always important, but it has become ever so important as we help support staff through a unprecedented, challenging time. Very quickly, myself and my boss, I report to the director of the press. Her name's Christy Henry. We realized the need to build in some extra communication with staff. So pretty much every week, staff hear from Christy or myself in all press email, but as well, we were doing more informal type of check-ins. We basically took our staff and took opposite ends of the alphabet and just checked in with them over Zoom, just to see how their home setup was, because our workforce was not remote. So everybody quickly and we're also a global workforce. So we have the bulk of our staff in Princeton, then our second largest office is in Woodstock, UK. And then we also have a China office. And so China was a little bit ahead of us with having to go remote. But so just everybody was kind of pushed to remote, and we had not been fully set up to work remotely. Not everybody has laptops. So just ensuring that folks' work home setup was our immediate priority when we were communicating, and then just making sure that on an ongoing basis and really fostering that openness of communication, even though, because we know oftentimes staff won't really speak up till there's a problem. So we just wanted to engage with them very early on to let them know that we were here for them if they needed to talk.
Thank you. Randy.
Sure. Very similarly, we leveraged as many different communication channels as we could. LinkedIn is probably a bit unique relative to some of the publishers in that we already had a lot of experience in engaging in video models. Video conferencing is kind of our default way of engaging with our customers. So to bring that internal wasn't a particularly heavy lift. We knew we had the infrastructure to do it. We knew our people were used to communicating kind of in a video model or video mechanism. So that wasn't a particularly heavy lift for us. But we really over-indexed on communication, probably overly so. And at some point we had to realize that we had to step back a little bit. But we were doing weekly video all hands with our CEO. At that point, when COVID really started to take off and offices started to shut, I think we set the record for number of people on a Zoom conference, in the tens of thousands. We had literally had the entire company on, with some geographic considerations in place. So, and we continued to do that. As the epidemic and the office closures started to spread, we really focused on making sure that every level of communication was being as engaging and as proactive. So team meetings, one-on-one meetings, all of those things, we really leaned into that. And really, as I said, relied very heavily on video. But in addition to that, we made sure that we also did a lot with wikis and online mechanisms. So if we had a session that was being led by myself or by the CEO or whomever, we would immediately follow it up with FAQs that comprised both the questions that came out in that video conference and anywhere else would go up on the wiki. So and they would be updated as new questions came. So real-time communications that answered specific questions that were coming up as time went on. So.
That's great. And I didn't ask this earlier, but this will probably be helpful for the audience. Kate, how many people in your organization?
150 spread across 3 offices globally.
Okay, Randy, sounds like you've got a massive amount.
Yeah, we're at about 17,000 spread across the globe. So we have to kind of do a follow the sun model as it relates to communications. Yeah.
Yeah, Hachette is about 1,300 in about 8 locations. So not as complex as Randy's, but probably a little bit more so than Kate's. And we've also tackled every type of communication you could imagine. And I found, and I'm curious what your staff thought, our employees so appreciate it. Maybe we over-indexed a little bit too, but I think particularly in the very, very beginning, it was so appreciated in the candor and the transparency around what was going on, what we knew and what we didn't know. which I think people need to understand, that you're not holding back. You really have no idea because it's all just so new. So that helps. Do you have an intranet site, Kate? It sounds like Randy has, ways of getting to everybody, but
Yeah, we do have an intranet. It's a SharePoint site. It's still being built up. It's fairly new. But just to add on to what Randy was saying, we have also created different opportunities for communication with key groups. So our senior management team, it's called Directors Council. So it's all the direct reports of our press director. And so we added on Fridays an open DC meeting so that was staff could rotate in and just ask us anything they wanted. And then we also have another group called Managers Council, which is a select group of line managers. And we did basically Managers Council with DC meeting, so that way that population could be hearing directly from senior management, because sometimes the employees don't want to go to the higher level of senior management. So we're just trying to create as many opportunities, but I do think we also kind of had to recalibrate at a point because we saw the participation drop and such over time. So we've started to reduce it. But I think that's really important, as well as key messaging. In the beginning, our consistent messaging was about really flexibility, because everything was so unknown, and we also know we had a lot of working parents. And as you said, Andrew, just being upfront about the things that we knew versus not knowing, but also being really clear with staff, here are the things that we know we can control, and we will help control those things for you during a time where so much feels out of our control. And I would say our messaging has now shifted while flexibility remains part of that messaging. We've started to incorporate language about resiliency, because we now understand that we are in this much longer than any of us anticipated. So I think that repetition of just even key terminology with our population has been really important, because I think a lot of us are still, we're working at home, we're very much more in our perspective than we've ever been before. So having just kind of that consistent messaging to help you focus at an organizational level what really is important right now is another critical component of communication.
yeah, absolutely. Which kind of gets us to, some best practices around managing a remote workforce, because for some of us that's been going on forever. We have a number of salespeople who we consider working remotely. They're not part of another office. We just lost Randy. Hopefully he'll pop back in. But what are some of the things you put in place to now manage people who are working from home, who are truly remote?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the things that we already did before, it's doing the same things, but just increasing it. But even just, my belief about management and your style is that it should be customized. I use the analogy, a good manager is like a tailor. You're always customizing the way you manage for that individual. And so something we were very clear about with our management group was, this is the time to double check about, you may have semi-monthly check-ins. Check in with that employee. Do they need more now? And that's really, let's be responsive and customized per the individual's needs. And that all, again, is accomplished through consistent communication and fostering open dialogue.
And were you able to avoid, I think what we've heard from a few people, what they were fearful of, and we've seen certain surveys that a number of groups have run, is this sort of fear of micromanaging a remote workforce. Have you seen that happen? And what has been the result of that?
To be honest, I haven't necessarily seen the micromanaging be a problem, or at least has not come my way. I think the biggest challenge for managers have been, pre-COVID, we often try to be consistent in our solutions and how we're helping individuals. And now we're in an era where we have to customize, we have to maybe deviate, and we're doing something for one person that we're not able to do for all. And one, it doesn't make sense to do it for all. So I think that's been honestly the bigger challenge, and what has come more my way is, can I do this? We wouldn't have normally done this. And my response has been, we're not in normal times. Let's talk about it.
Absolutely. So that, which gets to the flexibility and compassion for managers. Managers are used to managing, and I like to think of it, and I think Kate and I talked about this once before, is sort of church and state. You know, you were your manager, you talked about work things. Yes, every so often there was a personal thing that came back, but let's face it, we all came in and put our steamer trunks of baggage at the door and tried to move forward. And this is a little bit different. So compassion is probably one of the more important things, and the flexibility, as you're mentioning, and sort of tailoring. I love that. So how have you got managers to sort of wrap their arms around that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think a lot of that is communication and getting more comfortable with that merging of church and state, as we've talked about, Andrea, and saying kind of those boundaries that we used to put in place, they are not there anymore, because we are all in a situation that is, quite frankly, it's become very personal, and we do need to delve into that area. So I think a big component of that was just coaching managers up front and managing that expectation that we were about to enter new territory as managers.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting to see, you know, we worry about our employees, but our managers and our management are employees too. And, you know, that flexibility goes in a lot of different ways, because people are looking to us to know something and to have an answer. And I think we just have to try a lot of different things, you know, within a realm of what seems reasonable, but that reasonable shifts, I feel like, through the course of even a day.
Right.
But we're all kind of doing the best we can. But I think a real issue, at least for some of our staff and some of our managers, which we're doing some training, is how do you keep your staff motivated? You know, how do you keep them engaged? Given, you know, you had touched on, we have a lot of families who are taking care of children, elder parents, they're being caregivers across the board. We have employees who are living alone for months on end. And so how do we help managers manage that and shift when they need to?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of this too, Andrea, is about that sometimes we don't know all the right answers, and we have to find kind of the appropriate answer for this point in time. We try it out and we recalibrate and we iterate, and that's what I think. Yay, Randy's back. We have to be okay with that, right? And I think, and I will be honest, I mean, I think particularly in publishing, we're working with people that are looking at, you know, the finer details of everything, and somewhat of a perfectionist mentality. And this, again, we are just in a period of time that we have to be okay with. Sometimes the solutions aren't perfect, but that we're gonna at least attempt it and try and be open to just experimenting and then kind of growing from there.
Yeah. So Randy, we're talking a little about how to keep people connected and feel supported and motivated. And at the same time, you know, they have to get work done, you know, so it's you know, we care about them as people, yet we do have budgets that have completely shifted. I'm sure we're not the only company. So, you know, how do you do that? How do you deal with a staff where you have a number of people who are caregivers and they're teaching or running camp in their homes, and they're or dealing with elderly relatives or people who are sick, or they're living alone? And you know, how do you keep them engaged and motivated and also supported? You know, so curious what you see happening in your organization, and of course it's a big organization. So
Sure. No, that's you know, an extremely important topic. And first of all, apologies, I got a little power surge here and lost my modem, but it's back now. And we are a big organization, and I do recognize that, you know, I kind of speak from a point of privilege in that, you know, because of our size, because of, you know, our footprint, our financial resources, but at the same time, I work with clients of any number of sizes. So we have our challenges. I get to hear their challenges in this space. I think one of the things we did early on was that we made a conscious decision, and I'm sure I'm just echoing some of what was said already, that we were going to lead with compassion on this in this particular area. And I can genuinely say, you know, I'm a director responsible for a, you know, pretty substantial sum of revenue within the company, and I can honestly say that for the first month and a half of COVID, I didn't have one financial discussion. Everything was about how are we going to support our clients and how are we going to support our customers, and not support our customers from a, you know, what are we going to sell them standpoint, but where we learned something about how we're getting through this, how are we going to share it with them, because they'll be struggling with the same things we are, or even more so. So that was a key for us, to lead with compassion. Some of the ways we did that was that, you just immediately on the fly, we said we're going to give our employees the maximum flexibility. So even before we shut down our offices, we said if you need to work from home, work from home, and err on the side of caution. When we did shut down the offices, at that point, schools were still open. But as soon as schools closed, we said, okay, the dynamics for our employees are changing. Let's give them the maximum flexibility there. And then we realized that we needed to formalize that a bit. So we started what we call the EFA, which is Emergency Family Act, I think is what it stood for. But in any case, what we did was we said, if you have childcare or elder care situations that are going to impact your workday, maybe structurally impact it, but maybe even just emotionally impact it, then we're going to give you the space to sit down with your manager and restructure what your workday looks like. We allow people to take paid leaves of absences if need be, adjust their work schedule. So we extended that to employees, and we were serious enough about it that I would say maybe 3 weeks in, and that entire employee base that I mentioned to you of tens of thousands of people, I think we had 30 something who had actually applied for it. And we actually pressed our leadership to go back and say, no, something's not right here. Why aren't more people taking this up? And what we found, not surprisingly, is that people were reluctant to do so because they had concerns about how that would reflect upon them as employees. Would it impact them going forward? So we really leaned into it, encouraged people to do so. So that's one thing. The other thing is, before I fell off, we were talking about comms and meetings. One of the big misses that we had, and it took us a long time to get our brains around this from a connectedness standpoint, was that we do employee surveys. Normally we do them quarterly. We do them a bit more frequently in the current environment for obvious reasons. And we kept seeing the connectedness, not surprisingly, the connectedness feedback was pretty low, and we couldn't put our finger on why, what exactly was going on. We were doing all these meetings, we were doing team meetings, we were doing fun stuff, all of these things, and the scores still weren't there. Now, some of that we realized is just, there are things going on in people's lives that we can influence and control, so that was part of it. But the other thing we realized is that what we weren't creating was what goes on when you're in the office, such as what we would normally call the water cooler talk that some of us frown upon. Well, that was missing completely. Even on the business side, the idea that people would sit down together at lunch and 3 people might have a conversation about a business topic, that wasn't happening. So we were having all these I shouldn't say formal, but organized meetings and scheduled meetings, all of which were meant to promote connectivity, and we had missed the one thing that people were really looking for, is the ad hoc element of it. So we started thinking about ways we can do that. Now it's very difficult to create ad hoc online, but what we did start doing were things like cross-pollinating teams. So rather than have, we considered a nice little team meeting of 7 to be a very intimate situation. But the fact that it was the same 7 people all the time was problematic. So we said, let's start cross-pollinating. So those 7 people are made up of 2 from this team, 2 from that team, and 2 from another team. And then it hasn't closed the gap, but it has improved it considerably on the connectedness front.
That's a great idea. We had some training recently, and we had people from all different departments and locations, and everyone was just so happy to see each other and to share that, that was almost more important than the actual training itself. Just that connection, that water cooler that you can't recreate in a different kind of environment. But in terms of your managers, things are coming from on high, right? Are they buying into it? Are they sort of following the company? Or are you hearing feedback from employees like, I know that's what you guys are saying, but my manager's doing something different? Like, how are you? Have you found you need to influence managers a little differently?
Yeah, definitely. On 2 fronts. One is very much we precede the information to the managers to make sure we have buy-in, to make sure they lean into and show up for whatever it is that we're trying to drive as a company. Now we have never been a very prescriptive organization. So our approach to that is making sure they understand the why. Here's the why we're doing it. and also give each manager a little latitude to, to put their own flavor on it, but to make sure everybody understands the importance. So, you get pockets of challenges around buy-in, you always do, but I think that, making sure that we assess that up front, making sure the managers understand the why, giving them the guide rails that we're trying to operate in has helped that considerably. So, that's really the approach that we've taken on that front. And again, the other thing that is important to note is that, and this isn't new in COVID times, our managers have always been evaluated in part based on the survey feedback that I mentioned earlier. So they are very attentive to the fact that, we use that old terminology, feedback as a gift. They are very attentive to that feedback, both because they want to be good leaders, but it also impacts, how they get reviewed at the end of a period. So.
Thank you, Randy. Kate, what about you? Are your managers on board, or are they like, hey, I have a number to meet, I have a goal, and I need you guys to all be on board? Or were they picking up where you guys were directing them?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what Randy described. I mean, I think for the most part there was adoption, but there's these pockets where you're hearing there's a contrast in what we've been advocating, and that there is sometimes it goes down just to the employee level, and that there's a fear that's not actually based in a real interaction. It's just kind of an assumption that's being made. So some of that again is more about the manager fostering open communication and that flexibility that we express. But I do think a key component to get everybody on board was the repetition of the messaging, and then also creating the forums. Just as Randy had said, something that we already did prior to the current situation was running certain policy changes, certain process changes that would really impact managers because they would have to actually manage it. We would run it by them to get their feedback before it was disseminated to all staff. I mean, right now, and there might be PUP people on this call, so they're gonna hear something that, but right now, we have summer hours. I know a lot of publishers do this, and so it's, it's a flex schedule. It's a very prescribed flex schedule, but we've also provided options for other flexible scheduling that were built upon the CARES Act, because we also got a bank of additional paid time with that from the federal government, or that was mandated. But anyway, I think some of that was just so we are running the idea by the Managers Council and our Directors Council today. Actually, I emailed them about what do you think about extending summer hours, and summer hours in quotes, for the remainder of the year. Given that we have clarity at this point in time that this situation is going to continue, and that you will all have to manage it. So we just want to know, can we extend that flexibility to staff for at least the remainder of the year? Because it's really important to have all of those particular individuals or groups of folks through the organization to have their buy-in for the implementation to go well.
Absolutely. And thank you for the segue, because one of the next questions I was thinking of, going in whatever order, is the policy changes.
You might have just paused, Andrea, for a moment. Let's give her a second, see if she comes back.
Mm-hmm.
While we're waiting, one thing I would add, going back to the earlier question, is, just in terms of the adoption and the buy-in to the managers, one thing we've found at every level of our organization, from the E-suite all the way down to our individual contributors, is that more so than ever, people are looking for direction and prescription, more so than in prior environments. So a lot of that direction is even more welcome than it would be normally. I think it's just people trying to bring some normalcy and structure to the upheaval that we're in. So that definitely made it easier.
Yeah, there's similar experience happening here too, Randy. Just one thing to add while we're waiting for Andrea to come back on is the motivation piece. There were a lot of things that you were saying, Randy, too, that were mirrored here, particularly which is so employee engagement continues, and the relationship building that continues to be a vital part of successful collaborations. And at PUP, we have a community engagement committee, and their work prior to COVID was, yes, engaging our employee population, but because Princeton University Press is located on the campus of Princeton University, we are an affiliate of the university. It was more about those type of partnerships, but they shifted once we moved into this remote work environment. The community engagement committee has been tremendous at doing a lot of that trying to replicate or even create activities that would help satisfy some of that ad hoc type of interactions that folks would have. So they, the committee was amazing, and they created a consistent activity per day. So Mondays was meditation Mondays, Tuesdays was Take-In Tuesdays, which was have virtual lunch with your colleagues, walking Wednesdays, so basically walk with your colleagues while we have our headset in to Zoom. Not talk about work, just talk about what's going on. Thirsty Thursdays, obvious happy hours, but again, leveraging our connection to different authors and such. Like we had one of, we have a book called How to Drink, and the fellow that translated it, he led one of the happy hours and mixed drinks, and it was just a really awesome experience. And then on Fridays, we have what is called Friendship Fridays, and the person on the committee that coordinates that sends out an email on Fridays, reminds everybody it's Friendship Fridays. We're just encouraging folks to reach out to someone that you probably don't interact with normally through your work. And it can be a brief conversation, it can be a long conversation, but just take the time to connect with one of your colleagues today and get to just engage on a different level. And I think that's been incredibly meaningful for staff that we've created those opportunities, because I think there is a component of what's going on where folks are feeling really stretched because they are trying to balance personal and professional demands, and they don't necessarily have that time for that creativity for kind of the extracurriculars. And so to have our community engagement committee take the lead on that has just been incredibly tremendous.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Randy.
I was just going to echo what was said there. We do a lot of the same things, and they come from all different areas. I mean, some of them are company-wide, some of them are team-based, region-based, whatever the case might be. But just about every day we have those sorts of activities going on. And the other thing is that in an environment where, for us anyway, as a business, certainly, there was a financial impact and a performance impact based on what was going on. So employees, a lot of employees are looking for other ways that they can, we evaluate our employees based on results, leadership, and leverage. So it gave people an opportunity to really lean in on the leadership and leverage side, because they're looking for things they can do to make a contribution, and that even percolates into creating some of those sorts of initiatives and activities, et cetera. And when we do our review cycles, those things don't go unnoticed. So it's not just a well-being thing, and it absolutely is that. There's a professional element and a professional benefit that the employees see as well to getting involved, supporting, creating, and fostering that sense of community.
Yeah,
I was just going to throw in a quick note because some of the audience today might be from outside the tri-state area, but all of our panelists today are calling in from the middle of a tropical storm that's hit the New York area. So I apologize for the difficulties, but it's completely understandable. And welcome back, Andrea.
Great to be back. Sorry about that, guys.
That's okay. I don't think that we didn't have a chance to answer the question you're asking about policy, and so if you want to pick up with that, you're welcome.
Sure. So I think Kate was talking about some policy changes that they've made already. Are there others, and will they be sustained, do you think, after this is all over, whenever that is?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the policy changes that we made pretty early on that was related to just understanding the challenges that the folks were dealing with having to toggle between personal and professional demands. Our former policy with paid time off was that it had to be used in half-day increments, and it became very quickly apparent that sometimes people need a whole half day. They needed just an hour to take mom to a doctor's appointment or something. So we adjusted that for it to be that can be used in half-hour increments, and that was really it was a system change because we use a online system to request time off. So we changed that, and again, might be disclosing things to PUP staff there on the call, but yeah, we don't plan to change that. I think again, it's time to maybe get rid of some of that rigidness that was in these policies previously.
That's great. What about you, Randy?
Yeah, so we just finished off our fiscal year, so we're rolling out new policy changes as we speak. So I won't be able to go into detail on what exactly we're doing, but I will say this, that we've learned some things about ourselves as an organization, what we really need to do, what we don't really need to do, and those are being, and then there's the ongoing implications of the environment we're in. So when we put that together, there are absolutely things that we put in place as a work relates to work schedule, work from home, et cetera, that will not just be, that weren't just changed in the short term, that will have, longer term implications as well. Some of the less obvious things that we've changed are, LinkedIn as a company, very big on culture, and a lot of the basis for that culture was our physical environment, our offices, what we offered, and that started with the recruitment process. That was a big thing, to bring people into our office and let them get a sense of who we are as a company and those sorts of things. So a lot of our policy, procedure, and mindset changes are about how do we maintain as much of that as possible in a virtual world. We don't want to lose our culture. So how can we, either through policy or through training or through emphasis and intent, make sure that we retain as much as possible. So that's a lot of what we're focused on at the moment as well.
Yeah, we were talking about how all those, we talked before the water cool conversations, but we feel like a lot of what's working so well remotely is because we all have been together before. And we had a rhythm with each other. We had a level of trust with each other. And we knew our strengths and our weaknesses. So we were able to just carry on. And what do we need to do on a go forward basis so that that can continue? To your point, Randy, like, what do you put in place so that you can continue? What are the policies or processes or cultural norms that have to now be instituted that aren't going to just happen organically?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. And then in terms of even benefits, have you made any changes to your benefit plans? Are you intending to?
If we have not, nor do we have any intention to. I think the one that got the closest, well, I shouldn't say that. We have not, and some of the ones we're thinking about, we're a cycle off from being able to do so just from a contractual standpoint and those sorts of things. One of the ones that's getting the most attention is that we have what's called a perks program, which is a dollar budget each year that employees can get to spend on a number of things, such as gym memberships, et cetera, et cetera. And as you can imagine, in the midst of COVID, I don't want to say the value, but I'll say the value of some of that got questioned. So, what's the benefit of being able to get, spend money on a gym membership that's not out of pocket if you can't go to the gym name, for instance, right? So we're definitely looking at that, both in terms of what things people can spend money on. We never allowed them to use it for home gym equipment. Well, now we need to rethink that. So those are the kind of benefits and policies that we're looking at. One thing that's not a formal benefit for us, but all of our employees see it as a huge benefit, is we gave our employees free lunch and breakfast and snacks every single day.
Nice.
And now we're not in the office. And when we come back to the office, will we even be in an environment where people can sit in a cafeteria together, right? So those are things, again, they wouldn't show up, from an employee's mindset on their benefits along with healthcare, et cetera, but it absolutely is an employee benefit. And how do we continue to use that, to benefit our our employees in a world that's going to be completely different when we walk back in the door. So, those are the things that we're mulling over from a policy perspective and an investment perspective.
Interesting. What about you, Kate?
So we didn't give out free meals like LinkedIn did, but we also had a lot of free food. So that is another thing. I mean, we know we're going to actually open, we're planning on opening just for folks that want to come back to the office for their own well-being. We actually just released a survey to figure out who those individuals are the day after Labor Day, but we've made it clear, like, the kitchen's going to be closed, vending machines shut off, we're taping up the water fountain, things like that. So yeah, physical spaces and limitations is something we have to think about. But so as far as policy, so the HR department at Princeton University Press is fairly new. As I mentioned, I've only been here for 3 years, and we've made a lot of changes for our benefits package, particularly for 2020. What we spent more time doing once COVID hit was promoting more of these benefits. And we sent out a couple of summary emails, and there were a lot of things that were serendipitous, but last year, myself and our benefits manager, we dedicated the year to exploring more options for well-being. It was something that we kept hearing about mental health and that there wasn't enough support. I think we all know, just in general, this country needs to really improve that infrastructure. But so we really spent a lot of time trying to better understand. We have Aetna, trying to better understand the offerings that they had, promoting it to staff, making it clear that the behavioral health could be used telephonically when we moved remotely. And we actually, again, very serendipitously, had already scheduled one-on-one sessions that were open for staff to sign up with a behavioral therapist. And they were supposed to be in person actually the week that, I think, mid-March, that everybody shut down, and that person was amazing and was able to shift them all to telephonic sessions. And our benefits manager is working on actually setting up another round of those, because that is a key priority. So I think, yeah, awareness was really the biggest where we made changes with benefits here, was just increasing our communication and promotion.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we did. In terms of just making sure people knew about them and constantly reminding everyone about the mental health benefits, the telemedicine benefits. We just increased our backup childcare, where now there's in-home care options, which is new for us, was effective August 1st. And people seem very happy about that. We'll see how much usage we get. But on the other side is, like, a perk is like free books, right? There are books all over the office. So we do have an online lending library, which we call Holly. And so, we're really trying to promote that as well. But yeah, those are like little things that you forget, or just they really make people's day to walk around and see a book on the take shelves. And, it's real. We're talking about those things in the hall. But yeah, so we really have been very, very mindful of continually reminding people of our benefits. Randy, were you going to add something? It looked like you are.
Oh, it's just Kate reminded me that is one change that we did make mid-cycle, was around our mental health benefits. I think we doubled the number of visits that you could have in a year. I forget the exact statistic, but I think the usage rate on our mental health offerings tripled, if not quadrupled, during the course of March through, I would say, May sort of time frame. So
yeah, the employee assistance programs, yeah, people are really taking advantage, which is great, because you want them to have relief somewhere, right? And we're not all trained to do that. And I don't know how much time we have, Brian. I'm trying to be cognizant, so I just want to make sure that
we have a few questions, but please do continue. I think we'll be okay.
Okay. In terms of
Andrea, sorry, can I add? Oh, I'm sorry. Can I add one more thing about time off that I know I mentioned to you when we talked last week? We added, benefits. We added more paid time off. So one thing that we recognize, and I think this goes beyond just our organization, people are fatigued. There's way too much they're toggling between. And the one thing that I said to our press director was, we have the power to give them the gift of time. So we already had a winter break, a collective winter break, where all 3 offices shut down. So modeling from that, we took Memorial Day, made that a 5-day weekend. 4th of July is a 5-day weekend. Labor Day's a 5-day weekend, and it's the collective part that was critical. That the point that I made to our director was, it's one thing, I think we all get anxiety when we go away for vacation and come back, the email anxiety, because your colleagues are still working, but to allow everybody to have that time off where we're not filling each other's inboxes, I can't tell you how significant that was for people to have the opportunity to truly, like, we can't help you, you know, in taking away the time that you have to focus on your personal life, but we can help you in taking time away from work, and that you don't have to focus on two things, you know, personal and professional, for a period of time.
That's great. Yeah, we started our summer hours early. We did make people make up the time for that. We gave everybody a free day off. We just have, and I'm curious about Randy as well, we have the issue of not extending certain programs, of being very cognizant of our warehouse, because they can't do some of the things the rest of the staff can do. And that's close to 500 of our 1,300 employees. So we have to be really careful when we put some things in place, because they've been working the whole time, pretty much. So we can work a half day Friday, they really can't. So that's our little bit of a conundrum. I mean, we can work around it and figure things out, but the time off is so valued when there's not emails coming in constantly. Sorry, Randy, what were you going to say?
No, we did similar things. We don't have, probably because we don't have physical products, so we don't have warehouses.
Right.
With the offices being closed, we don't have to worry as much about facilities folks. So the number of people who can't take advantage of time off is far more limited, I think, in my organization than many. And we also have a significant portion of our employee community that is on unlimited time off. But even with that, we did some of the same things you talk about, which was extend the holiday weekends. We just had a few random, we're going to close this Friday, for instance, so that people, what we were finding is people weren't taking time off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even though they had unlimited time off, they weren't taking it. So we had to find ways to get people to actually unplug, shut down, and just, you know, refuel. So we leaned into that quite a bit, just like you guys did.
Yeah, we keep sending reminders out. Don't forget, take your vacation time.
We're having the same issue that people are not opting in to use their time off.
It's something you have to be conscious of, not to take up too much more time, but I can remember sitting in a leadership meeting and telling my directs that they really need to take time off and encourage their folks to take time off. And the feedback I got was, when are you taking your time off? You know, so
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're not above calling people out on those sorts of things, because I hadn't taken any and I had to be reminded. So
yeah. I'm actually taking some next week, but yeah, every time I start one of my meetings with my staff, the first part of our agenda is, did anyone put down their vacation time yet? When are you taking your time? So kind of almost bully them into taking care of themselves. There are worse things, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then just quickly, in terms of recruiting and onboarding, if you're doing hiring now during all of this, how is that going? Has anything changed relative to recruitment processes and strategies and interviewing? And then once you actually identify a candidate, bringing them on board to an organization that's, to your point, Randy, earlier, like it used to be about bringing them onto the space. Have you changed any tactics around that? What do those look like?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we've done is we've made the entire recruitment process more high touch than it probably was in the past. You know, it was very high touch in the past, but even more so. And we've created a few virtual tools, and I don't mean technology tools, but just ways to engage the customers, either the people we're evaluating or the people we're bringing on board. Just sending them gifts along the way, for instance, you know, little LinkedIn tchotchkes, that sort of thing. You know, we found that helps. From the time an offer, so for instance, with our MBA hires, we had extended offers to, you know, up to 6 months before they were going to start. We made sure that there was regular outreach from their manager to be. And again, we used to have that before, but we really leaned into it. We started bringing them into team meetings earlier than they would have been normally. So just to get that connectedness as early in the process and as consistently through the process as possible. We haven't done a tremendous amount of new hiring, so I can't say that we've tested that for scale yet. You know, we still have some things we need to look at there and evaluate. But yeah, just more touch points. We've also gone back, that's the other thing we have done. We have reassessed all of our onboarding, training, materials, etc., to make sure that they actually hold up in a virtual world. You know, this isn't always just a lift and shift where you can take the materials you have and just assume they'll work, you know, in a virtual world, because that's certainly not always the case. So and it's led to some significant changes. And going back to your question about permanent policy changes, I think some of those will stick even when we're back to being face-to-face, because they're better, quite frankly, than they were before.
Yeah, it really does force things that would have taken years or however long to do. It's like, okay, poof, now we're doing it this way, everybody, and everyone just goes. Kate, what about you on the recruiting and onboarding front?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a ton of recruiting, you know, we're smaller, but I think it was already a high touch process. We also serendipitously had released an online based onboarding program last fall. So again, we were already kind of positioned well in that regard. I had asked our HR assistant to revisit that for exactly what you mentioned, Randy, about is this still effective when we're not actually seeing this person, you know, physically. We have definitely, I mean, I think we leave it up to the department. There's administrative onboarding, which obviously HR handles, and then there's the departmental onboarding. And I know that the departmental onboarding, there has been much more intentionality with having those connections made, because relationship building is so critical when you're new. And so just making sure that they're really meeting with the people that they should, as well as meeting with people that might be opportunistic, that could lead to work down the road. And I think just one thing that's really important to mention is PUP was not really a multi-state employer. So that has been a whole other kind of route for us that I think Randy and Andrew, you haven't had to deal with payroll setup. And that's been, we're in a weird period of time where we're not sure if the federal government's paying attention to the fact that our staff have dispersed, but meanwhile, we absolutely are hiring new people that clearly are not starting in Princeton, New Jersey. So that's been, it's quite frankly a hurdle we're still working through.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, you know, what makes sense, what no longer makes sense, and how much more open we are to maybe hiring people in locations, particularly I think for people like Kate and I, because it sounds like, Randy, you've had people all over. We don't. So now it's like, well, why wouldn't we hire somebody on a regular basis from a completely different state? I mean, we do it rarely, but we do it sometimes. Now it's like, well, what's been stopping us all this time?
Yeah, we've had to rate. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
I was just going to say we've had to raise that question of ourselves, both in terms of external hires and even internal mobility. You know, should we have these geo constraints on people who are going from one org to another within the business? So it's definitely raised those questions. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's always like we can't hire somebody from there. Like it'll never work. It's like they're living there now, by the way. So it's really very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And then in terms of when we get back, you know, hopefully that will happen at some point. Are you rethinking the physical workspace, how things are structured, how they're set up? I know for now we have to, because if they do come back in, you have to do social distancing and, like you said, close off water fountains and cafe spaces. But what are you thinking about the rest of the space?
I can go ahead. I know, Randy, you have many offices, so we actually have a committee. It's for the safe return of staff for when we can fully open, and we do have a fair amount of open space, as is common with many organizations, and we will have to rethink that when, or is it less people in that space, right? So it's definitely, we're in a 100-year-old building, which we have limitations on what we can do, but there's, you know, what we have done is filtration systems. We've changed those out. Our toilets, you know, things that you don't think about, that they are not automatic flushing. So looking at having that changed, as well as the door, having doors that you don't have to touch, that they open automatically. So a lot of that physical setup that we're working through, we don't have the immediate solution right now.
Interesting. Randy, I know it's just you have all these different locations, but are there some big themes?
Yeah, I mean, we are completely rethinking the workspace. We've got a group of people that's all they're working on right now. Well, that plus, you know, how do we come back to work, you know, as a process. But yeah, no, physical changes to the employee workspaces. We have open plan as well, so that will be completely reconfigured. What we do with our cafeterias, what times people work, will be another thing. I would be surprised if we didn't have some sort of staggering that comes into place. So no, our employees will come back to a completely different configuration from a workspace, office, and environment standpoint than what we're accustomed to.
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting. I was talking to some people the other day, and one of the things that we asked were like, what were some of the biggest surprises during this time? And it could be anything, but since we're talking about managing through this, what most surprised you about either your managers or your employees during these last 5 months or so? Kate, do you want to answer first?
Yeah. I think honestly, the biggest surprise is just how easily they adapted and how productivity did not suffer. I think that's been a pleasant surprise. And I mean, I think universally, I think the biggest surprise is that we're still in this situation and we're continuing to have to recalibrate and continue to be creative to get through this unprecedented period of time.
What about you, Randy? Any big surprises?
Yeah. I don't know if I would say surprises, but what has really made me feel great, quite frankly, the resiliency is incredible. The reliability, we never had to sit down and say, are these people at home actually working or anything like that? The reliability, and just the one thing that was surprising to me, and I think maybe it's somewhat generational and somewhat just personality for me, is just how much the work family, for lack of a better term, means to people. Just really off the charts. And you saw that in good and bad ways through the course of what's been going on.
Yeah, I agree. I think people's resiliency, their ability to just keep moving forward, have their strength, even when things have been really bad for them personally, it's remarkable. And just the fact that people really, really miss their connections, like how important that is for everybody is just so spot on. I know we're practically out of time. So once again, I want to make sure from Brian that we're okay. If there's anything else.
Thanks. It was just, no, it's okay. A question just that came in. PRH announced this week that it was looking at 2021 as its return date. If that, it was they didn't say it was going to be January 2nd, but just sometime next year. And the question for this group, I think, is how do you prepare when even the end date's an unknown? I mean, it's got to be a challenge.
It's really hard. We have meetings about this at least twice a week, and it's a moving target. So we were thinking, oh, probably around Labor Day, and now Labor Day is practically tomorrow. And we're still in a sort of phase 1 opening with like maybe 10% in the offices that we even open, because we have some states we don't want to open because we don't feel they're safe yet. So we just keep communicating and trying to figure it out, but it looks like it's getting pushed more and more. We're going to be sending an update to our employees tomorrow about what our thinking is now that, like I said, the timing is right around the corner.
Yeah, one thing that I've said to our director is we do not need to be pioneers in reopening our office. So I think this is one where we kind of lean back and take a look at what everyone else is doing and and listen to the science and continue to make our employees' well-being and safety the priority.
Yeah, our CEO on day 1 said we will be the leaders in closing. We will absolutely not be the leaders in opening. So
yeah,
let's
he said that close in a blink of an eye, and opening is going to be a long slog ahead of us for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it keeps moving. It just keeps moving.
Yeah.
Well, speaking as a person who actually hired the only other person that works at BISG in the middle of the pandemic, I can attest that it does work. It's just you just have to strip it down to the things that are essential to hiring.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The only other question we had came from me, and it was for Randy, and it's to ask if feedback really is a gift. And
yes, but some gifts are tough to swallow. is the answer. I think when you build a culture that is very much around everybody improving and working together, then, you know, what is difficult to hear when you take a step back, you do appreciate it. So, but it's tough. It's tough, and it's different than a lot of environments. I will tell you that.
It makes me happy to work in a two-person office.
Yeah. So.
All right. So Kate, Randy, Andrea, thank you very much for making the time, for braving the weather and some technical challenges. I think you made it clear that if there's a new role for HR, it is actually helping guide us through this pandemic and into a better space. So we're glad to have you on our side, but also glad to have you supporting BISG today. Thanks again, and best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.